Coming by this afternoon.
I'd like to introduce Michael Sundra, artist from Farmington. I just want to say one thing about him, that I was acquainted with Michael back in like 1989. He had a show of photography at the York Square Cinema Gallery that I directed in like 1991 or 2.
Yeah.
Of photographs. Some were very interesting, beautiful nudes that were very much loved by the staff there. And he also was a photographer of a very dear friend of mine, Joyce Zarek, who I was introduced to by my friend Bob Cunio was here. And Michael's work is very interesting. And I spoke with him in in September. We discussed having a photography show, but then he said, "Well, we'd really like to show us paintings." And he showed me this series of work which I thought was very extraordinary. And so I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I'm very pleased to introduce him. Michael spoke very much about his idea. That, he said, "I respond to things that are in relationship with time, and words in a dream that came one morning in early 2007, soon after I began an investigation of the arch form, the oldest man-made form, the arch form." So you'll see that in his work. I'd like him to speak about his work. Thank you, Michael, and welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to show here. Thank you very much. Again. Thank you again for coming. It's sort of the painting evolved from. It started with just straight photography. I've been a photographer for 40 years, and I did landscapes and still life, and but I became very interested. I always had a way with people, and I was very interested in conceptual portraiture, psychological portraiture, no smiley faces and this kind of a thing, And so in 1986, I think it was, 84, somewhere in there, I started doing in earnest a series of these portraits. And I kept it up, and I had a big exhibit of these. And after the exhibit, I sort of was burnt out from doing old photography, because simultaneous with that, I was doing a lot of big commercial accounts. I mean, I had a commercial photography business in Hartford, so it was almost 24 hours a day photography, either commercial or fine art. And after the show, I was in my studio, and I knew I was going over my mind of what I wanted to do next. And I work with a lot of art directors from commercial ad agencies, and they must have, the one art director must have left an oil stick in my studio, and it was just like there on the ground, and what is this? So I picked it up, and I made a mark on a black and white photograph, and it really excited me. It just looked that contrast. So that's what started. I started painting directly on my photographs, not on canvas or anything, just directly on the photographs. And then it's just evolved. I became more and more interested in painting, and the photographs started evolving on canvas. I would print the print. It was a straight photography print. And then at the stage where I put on the gesso, I applied a wet photograph. So everything was wet, and when it dried, it was permanent, tight as a drum. And then that became the pretext for a painting, and that's how these mixed media pieces evolved. And I did this. I have a body of work in this genre. I probably worked on this for maybe 10 years, I guess. And then it just evolved into the straight paintings. I just wanted to totally immerse myself in painting. So the question was, as any artist here knows, is what to paint. That's like, 3/4 of the battle. And I started experimenting with shapes. You know, I was working part-time as a guard at the New Britain Museum of American Art, and you're not supposed to draw there, but I knew where all the cameras were, so I would, you know, I knew where to stand where they wouldn't see me. And I started drawing, just exploring ideas, and I was working with squares and rectangles and that, and I started stacking two squares on top of each other, and I thought, well, it looks, you know, a lot like Mark Rothko, and that's been done already, so I kept experimenting, and, you know, I dropped the bottom edge out and made a curved line, and I realized it was an arch, and I've always been interested in arches historically, like way back in time, the Romans. So I decided on this, and then that's how it evolved. I didn't want to paint or draw perspective on it, because my interest in painting is abstract. I love abstraction, and I tried some where I painted perspective, like top three-quarter views or whatever, and it looked too much like an illustration, commercial illustration. So I decided to go the completely abstract route, and that's how it evolved. So a lot of the texture was created with gravel. I just went to Home Depot, bought a 40-pound bag of gravel that you used to throw in the winter on the ground, and I mixed it with in the gesso, sometimes in the paint, and then just proceeded to paint. A lot of the paints are mixed; they're not straight out of the tube. I wanted to shy away from really harsh, strong color. So I mixed a lot of the color with their complementary colors to tone them down. So that's how most of this has evolved. The metallic pieces happened, I tell you, I went to a Jasper Johns exhibit in New York City last year. It was an exhibit of his new work. I think it was either Pace or Matthew Marks, I'm not sure who was representing. And he returned to his numbers and alphabets, and but he did this whole series in metal. He did it in real gold, real silver, real bronze, and aluminum. And I mean, they really blew me away. They were stunning. And I think that's where this idea to work. I thought that it would be a good combination with these forms, because they have this ancient quality to them, but I wanted it to have a contemporary feel too. So, and this is where it leaves off. In fact, those two pieces on the bottom there, the two square ones, are still wet. So don't touch them. So that's how it all happened. Any questions?
Can you tell us about that beautiful painting there with the orange?
That's quite a story on that, actually. It's a sad story. This is the Reverend Jeff Dugan from St. James Presbyterian Church in Farmington. And one of his parishioners was helped out with their organization, Doctors Without Borders. And she went to, and this was at the time when all those slaughters were happening in Rwanda, I guess late 80s, early 90s. And there was a boy who witnessed his whole village burnt alive in a church, just slaughtered. They locked like 300 people in this church and locked the doors and set it on fire. Somehow he was hiding, but he witnessed the whole thing. So in his stupor, he was holding onto a branch, a charred branch, and he just walked away, and stick broke off, apparently. And he wandered into this camp of Doctors Without Borders, and this woman there befriended him. And while he was there, this was like a period of about a month, month and a half, he carved this, it's a crucifix that's in there. And when it was time for her to leave, he gave it to her, and she didn't want it in her house because of the violence that it represented. And so when she came back, she gave it to the minister.